Argylle is directed by Matthew Vaughn and stars Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell. Bryce Dallas Howard plays Ellie Conaway, the author of a spy novel saga, who gets thrown into a plot where her novels are mirroring a real-life spy organization. This movie was interesting. This is created by the same people who worked on The Kingsman, and you can see that very quickly. It's very stylistic in terms of its action and visual storytelling. I actually liked a lot of the visuals in this. It's also an interesting concept, you know, the idea of books coming to life, or more so, books mirroring reality and reality mirroring the books. This is actually a really deep cut, but it weirdly reminds me of this Disney Channel movie from way back called Dadnapped, where this dad was the author of a fictional book series, and he gets kidnapped, and the people that kidnapped him are trying to recreate the books. It's not really the same thing, but it just kind of made me think of it. But yeah, let's get into some of these positives. So first of all, the direction is really well done. I really like what they did with the visuals here, specifically what they did with their color palette. There's a lot of very vibrant colors, both from the set design to props and costumes. It all just is very in your face about it, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's just vibrant, and I kind of liked that style choice. I also think the action is very fun and kind of cheesy, but I feel like that's what they're going for. It's not exactly realistic, but it's a very fantastical version of spy thriller fight scenes. Very over the top, very intricate stunt work. Shout out to the stunt team, by the way. There's a lot of hard bumps in this movie and some very intricate fight choreography that I really enjoyed. Honestly, because of the style of the fights and a lot of the dialogue choices, it actually had me believing this is a satire on the entire spy film genre. There's a lot of stuff in here that you've seen a million times before in a ton of different spy movies, but it feels like this is taking those ideas and twisting them in a satirical, just fun kind of way, and I did enjoy that. Before I get into my negatives, I really did enjoy this film. I had some fun with it. I really hope they were trying to make it a satire, because that's how it came off to me. And if it is a satire, that's a lot of fun. Especially at the start of the movie, the dialogue is so cheesy, and it makes sense because it's supposed to be pulling from, you know, spy thriller novels. Like, we're seeing a visual representation of her novels. The whole opening is very over the top and cheesy. You have Henry Cavill and John Cena trading some banter. There's a lot of one-liners in here, and that was honestly really fun. There's a lot of CGI in there because they're doing things that genuinely aren't possible on cars and bikes, but I didn't really mind, at least at the start, because it really felt like they were just going for this fun, cheesy idea, and I was on board with it. These satirical elements are great, but that's only if it really is a satire. I'm gonna do my best to avoid spoilers here, but toward the latter part of the movie, it started doing something that I didn't really expect, and it made me really question everything that I just watched, and not necessarily in a good way. Okay, I can't really dance around this, so I'm just gonna put up a spoiler warning right now. I'm gonna mark when the spoiler starts and ends, so feel free to skip ahead to that part if you want to avoid this and continue the review, but this is a spoiler warning for the end of this movie. Spoiler warning, spoiler warning. Alright, you have a few more seconds, and okay. This movie ties into The Kingsman, and I understand that they're trying to make it almost a franchise thing and a universe thing, and make it a big callback for fans of The Kingsman. But by placing this in the same universe as Kingsman, it doesn't really work. At least not in my opinion. The whole point of it is that she's telling these stories about a spy, and that they're fictional stories, but they're mirroring reality. But by having this twist of it being in Kingsman and showing a young version of Argylle, it makes me wonder, well, what was the point of all the stuff we just did? If that's Argylle, then what you revealed in the film can't be Argylle. Or are we seeing a representation of the books? Is this a fictional thing? Like, are we gonna see a prequel that's around her stories and that we're actually just seeing the books brought to life? But if we're seeing the Kingsman, then doesn't that kind of break Kingsman? I don't know, I just found it really confusing. Anyway, spoiler section is over right here. Whew, how about that spoiler, huh? So anyway, we're back in spoiler-free territory. Another issue I had with it, again, if it's a satire, that's great, but it's still, it almost went a little too far here, and for me, that was with plot twists. This movie twists on itself and then twists again and then does it 2 more times just for good measure. And while that's fun, and some of the twists I actually really did appreciate, and I thought that they were enjoyable, and again, almost making fun of the genre itself, but within the actual context of the story, worked kind of well. We did reach a point where it was just too many twists. It got to the point of it was kind of confusing and almost hard to follow. There were a couple times where these twists revolved around a character that you didn't really know all too well, or that the movie mentioned once earlier, and now it's a big deal. And I respect that, and I respect that they're trying to do all these twists, but sometimes you can twist a little too much, and I feel like that's what happened here. And not just for me. I heard a lot of groans throughout the theater, a lot of confused murmurings and people asking questions to each other about what exactly was going on. I also kind of touched on it at the start. There's a lot of CGI in this movie. Granted, they're just kind of having fun and they're using mostly the CGI to do stuff that wouldn't even be possible. But it's still really obvious. It can kind of separate you from the movie. I think where it actually fits in okay is when we're doing flashes from the book, because you know that this is fantasy anyway. So if you throw CGI of something that's a little ridiculous and impossible, for example, toward the start of the film, this is not a spoiler, it's really at the beginning of the movie, the car does a like rail slide, like you'd see somebody do on a skateboard where they're sliding down a railing. A car does that. So obviously not possible, but kind of fun and fantasy filled, and just going for kind of a gag almost in that moment. I think in those points the CGI feels fine. There's a lot of CGI just giving them green screen backgrounds, and it can pull you out of the experience a little bit. I also want to talk about the editing in this film, because I feel like it's both a positive and a negative, and I'm going to explain that here. On the positive side of it, I feel like what they did was actually very creative. There's a lot of shots from a first-person perspective where we're looking through Ellie's eyes watching the action, and she'll blink, and you'll see the blink on screen, and the main character of the spy will change. So at points it's Henry Cavill, at other times it's Sam Rockwell. Which means they basically had to film these fights twice and make sure that the choreography was matching up. When Henry Cavill comes on scene, it becomes a bit more fantastical and leans into the satire element. When Sam Rockwell's on scene, it's much more of a grittier, slightly more realistic fight. It's still very over the top, very wild, something you would honestly kind of expect from Kingsman. On the negative side of it, however, it can be a little bit jarring. I feel like this is most noticeable at the start of the film, where it becomes kind of jarring because you're not really used to it yet, but once the film gets going and you get farther into it, I feel like you just kind of adjust to it. So I don't want to completely fault them because I really appreciate the creative aspect of it and how difficult that must have been. I feel like that's an almost Herculean task when it comes to editing and filming a fight scene twice with all these different performers in it. I don't think I have much more to say about this movie. It is a fun time, it feels like a satire, kind of making fun of the whole spy genre, but it also feels like some of the twists I discussed in the spoiler section almost ruin the satire element of it and really calls into question what the intentions of this film really are. I'm giving Argylle a 7 out of 10. It's probably not what you're expecting. It does come off as a fun, satirical, comedy, action, spy, thriller kind of movie. It's not bad, but it's nothing spectacular either. And the style both in editing and choreography definitely takes some getting used to. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Argylle, or what's your favorite action comedy movie. Quick channel update before I sign off. I am going on vacation for a little bit, which means I'm not going to have a new movie review for you next week. But once I get back, you can rest assured knowing I will be posting reviews of the latest movies in theaters. On that note, subscribe for more reviews very soon, and until then, so long, friends.